Hello out there in cryptocurrency land. Welcome back to Real Crypto. Thanks for joining me once again here today. So we're going to take a look at Bitcoin, some of the top altcoins, pretty much the ones on GDAX. I may go into Ripple a little bit there towards the end. But last time we made a video, we discussed Bitcoin going back down here towards 7,200, which was the implied measured move target coming from 10,000 to this most recent low. And that's pretty much where that brings us down there towards the 7,100 area. So far, that actually has not looked like it's playing out. And as you guys know, when we do charting, we pretty much kind of plan for what looks like it's possible. This particular move, though, looks like it's waning. Looks like there's a little more strength in the market. The selling is kind of died down a little bit, and we're actually forming what you see here, which is a declining wedge in the market. And this really didn't come forming in until this morning when Bitcoin recently bottomed over here, and we've had this most recent upthrust. So there's a few more lines on my chart than normal. The first thing that I want to show you actually is something I've noticed a few days ago, but for some reason I haven't been keeping an eye on too much. There's a head and shoulders here in Bitcoin, right at about the 10,000 level. Here's your neckline in that head and shoulders pattern, and this trend line here is actually your implied target for the head and shoulders pattern, which we actually hit. We actually hit that target for that head and shoulders. And down here, you can see I have this rectangle box. This is actually an area of support for Bitcoin. And it comes into play due to this very first base that Bitcoin had off of its jump, 2-hour bar right here, this jump 2-hour bar, and this little consolidation area. I'm basically taking the lows here and kind of the closes here as an area of support, because you can see it was tested 1, 2, 3, 4 times during this base, and it was held up. So this is the first test of that area, and so far this test is held. All right, so far it's held. You can see the volume isn't extraordinarily bullish. Volume is not extraordinarily bullish, nor is it extraordinarily bearish. And I think that leads to why this bear flag hasn't broken down. What I thought was going to happen, and you guys know what I think about thoughts. I don't like any thoughts, even my thoughts. I don't like anyone's thoughts. I like market action. I also like being prepared for any situation. So what I thought was going to happen is, based on the strength of this move, I thought we would almost mirror this with maybe a test here for a couple hours, then a drop lower, and then maybe a drop lower. And we'll get down here in about 3 days or so. Well, it's been what now? 3 days. And that has not happened. We've actually come right back to the low of the bear flag. There's actually some strength here. What you're going to notice is two things. You're going to notice that when it broke down from this bear flag, it broke down with one big swift bar on good volume, mind you. That's some good selling volume. And then it based immediately afterwards. It didn't break down. It didn't have a subsequent sell-off. It didn't pause for 1 or 2 hours and then fail again. That shows extreme weakness. This shows a little bit of strength, this consolidation. And now it did have a throwback into the breakdown point right here. So here's the trend line. This is the point where the trend line was broken. So you have basically a trend break line, a trend break price here. We bounced directly into that, failed, and then subsequently rolled over, breaking this trend line. And then we broke that again, and then we found support here, putting in the low for this potential declining wedge pattern. So with the action this morning, it kind of changes the behavior of the market a little bit to less bearish and a little bit more back to choppy. We were stuck choppy for a while, then we went into a downtrend. Looked like the downtrend was going to continue, and we got chop instead. So it is what it is. Now what you see here is this most recent bounce had a little bit more strength to it. You can see that higher volume candle right there. Came back into this most recent breakdown point, actually went above it, and now we're forming a higher base here. So if we can get above this trend line here, which is at the 82.32 level is where I have it at, give or take a few dollars. I have it at the 82.32 level. If we can get above that, we're going to have a test at this trend line right here, and we'll see if we pass it or fail it, ladies and gentlemen. Anything can happen. The last time we had a declining wedge in Bitcoin, of any substance, it was back over here. It was a pretty big declining wedge. So we had a declining wedge forming right there, coming in right there, and we did break up. We actually had a poke to the downside, if you remember. Kind of a failed break down, if you will, or just a test, depending on how you look at it. and then it bounced up higher. Didn't get very far, mind you, and then rolled over again. Maybe a similar situation here. I don't know exactly, but if we do bounce up out of this declining wedge, I would assume this 200 period moving average may end up being some resistance. This is at about the 88.50 level, or you know, lining up almost exactly with the high of the bear flag. This would make a decent point, whether it be the wicks or the body closes. Either one is going to be a decent place for it to bounce into. So if it breaks the rising wedge, odds are it can get here and then fail, and really wouldn't put the bear trend at much risk. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. So maybe we come up here, fail again, and then bouncing. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but a little bit more bullish here than I thought we were going to be. And actually, if you take a look at the RSI, there's a bit of a divergence that occurred. I don't pull RSIs up a lot, but I think I'm going to use them a little bit more, to be quite frank with you. They're proving to be pretty valuable here in Bitcoin. So we had the extreme value here in RSI coming off of this extreme sell-off, and this was an extreme sell-off. And then we bounced higher, formed another low here. And if you notice the low, there was a divergence. So it was a lower low with a higher low in the RSI. So that's obviously a divergence, shows there's more bullishness in the market. And then again, we have a lower low breakdown here with the RSI staying steady at this level, showing a little bit more support. And, you know, we saw that in the charts before we looked at the RSI, but the RSI does confirm that as well. So Bitcoin, kind of a mixed bag here, guys. Kind of a mixed bag. We're still looking bearish as long as we're underneath this, you know, 82.45 level. I think I moved that a couple bucks. As long as we're below that 82.45, 80.50 level, whichever exact dollar amount that is, as long as we're below there, there's a risk that this trend can return lower. But if we break this definitively and then get up towards this trend line of the wedge and break outward, obviously that's a different situation. So Bitcoin mixed bag here. We definitely have bearish tendencies, but we have a bullish formation here. So odds are this may break out and then maybe break down again and roll over like we saw over here. So go ahead and keep that in mind. One thing to mention, this one came up to the bottom of its bear flag, if you guys remember. In case you don't, let me show that to you. So here's the breakdown. Here's the large bear flag, kind of right in the middle. Right there, it came pretty close to the breakdown point, depending where you want to draw that. But it came pretty close to that breakdown point and then failed again. So, you know, over here, you can see here's that exact same point. We could only get up to here, or we could even get to the top. That wouldn't be out of the ordinary. So let's go ahead and look at Ethereum, which is basically showing bearish action. Ethereum has a pretty well-defined head and shoulders forming right here with a neckline. At this particular moment in time, the breakdown point of the neckline would be 672. If this breaks down, then it has an implied target of 484 to the I think it's 460 level. There's a range here depending if you draw your neckline from the wicks or if you draw your neckline up here from the bodies. Depending on how you draw it, this changes. So, but either way, that is a bearish action over here in Ethereum. The only way we're going to break this, or actually I should say what negates a head and shoulders pattern, is a break above the high in the shoulder, and that line is at 745. If you did want to play a bounce off of this, if you don't think this is going to play out and you think that it's going to go up, this isn't too bad a place to buy. You have about a 5% risk before the breakdown here, if you want to play it that way. But again, Bitcoin looking somewhat bullish, Ethereum looking somewhat bearish. It's a mixed bag. This is a choppy market overall, and that can be difficult to trade in. Let's take a look at Litecoin. So Litecoin having a head and shoulders as well. You can see the formation. These are all over the place. We're going to see these in pretty much every chart today. There's your head and shoulders in Litecoin. You have a neckline right here. This would imply a very, very deep, very deep. I actually haven't plotted this yet. Let's go ahead and do that. So there's your breakdown point. That takes us down to 85 in Litecoin. That would be a very bad break, undercutting these lows. So I don't know how the likelihoods of that happening, but that's what's implied in the chart. Not something I'm pulling out of my butt. Head and shoulders, neckline, implied target. There you go. Bitcoin Cash having a multiple head and shoulders pattern, just moving all over the place. Bitcoin Cash very, very busy. There's a trend line here putting a top to the whole market. We've already broken this neckline. We tested the neckline here. Get a good look at that. We tested the neckline right here, failed that, subsequently lower. living in a low area, not very bullish, and you can see the implied target in Bitcoin Cash to the 710 level, which would be a pretty aggressive sell-off. So actually, let's look at XRP next. XRP also kind of has a weird head and shoulders pattern. It's a little awkward. Not necessarily going to say it's, super well defined, but right there you kind of have, there's your weird head and shoulders pattern. There's your neckline. Your break takes us well below most recent lows. And we're kind of on our way. That takes us down to the 63 level against BTC. That's XRP BTC. So as you can see, that takes us under these most recent lows. Why is my XRP? Sorry guys, I thought I had a different chart up here. There we go, XRP USD. All right, bit of a different chart, bit of a different situation. So there's a trend line right here supporting us at the 62-cent level. Also the same declining trend line that we just saw in what was that, Bitcoin Cash. Same declining trend line in Bitcoin Cash, but you are seeing some support here. So XRP has already had the breakdown, a pretty big breakdown coming down into this prior basing area, putting in a multiple bottom over here, coming up to this trend line. There's a decent possibility that there may be a bounce in XRP in our near future. If you look at the RSI, you can see that we had a lower spike here and subsequent higher double bottom over here, where we had a lower low on the price. We had a divergence in the RSI with a double bottom in the RSI. So there's a possibility we get a bounce in XRP here. There's a pretty decent risk reward too. Your risk here is only about 3 to 4% on the downside, with a pretty good potential on the upside if this can rally. There's potentially 40% on the table. Not quite sure it's going to rally that high, but again, more mixed action overall in the markets. We're seeing the top coins flip-flop. Bitcoin Cash has already broken down, living lower. XRP is already broken down. We see Litecoin here broke down. This is actually a very weak head and shoulders pattern with this neckline declining versus an inclining like in Ethereum. This is a more normal head and shoulders pattern with an inclining trend line. With the Litecoin declining trend line shows much weaker action. And this hasn't quite broken down yet, but we do have very, very quiet volume, meaning that a move can happen in either direction at any time, and a breakdown here would probably be fairly catastrophic for Litecoin over the next couple of days if we did get a break to the downside. And then we see Ethereum with the bearish action, and then we see Litecoin with a head and shoulders that had already played out completely with a declining wedge showing bullish behavior. So it's a very mixed bag here, guys. It's hard to say exactly what to do. If you could trade each coin on its own merit, then that would be a different action. You could trade Bitcoin maybe bullish, you could trade Ethereum maybe bearish, you could trade Bitcoin Cash bearish, you could trade Ripple for a bounce. But the way the cryptocurrency markets generally work, if Bitcoin bounces a little bit or goes sideways, all these other coins will rally. If Bitcoin falls like this, if Bitcoin falls further in the declining wedge, then odds are most of these will fail, and the bearish ones will fail, and the bullish ones will look less bullish. So it's a mixed bag, guys. You're going to have to pick your spots. This is a difficult market to trade in. It's not trending very well. We did have a nice trend here, breaking this neckline, but that was pretty short-lived. That was only about 8% to the downside. And if you knew this was a bear flag, and you're up again 8%. So very choppy market overall, not very trending. Is 7,200 still in the cards? Absolutely. 7,200 is still in the cards. If we don't get any big bullish push over this most recent high, which again 82.45, 82.50 being that level, then we're probably just going to roll over. Probably break through this support area and then roll over. But if we break this support area, that's really not going to be good for the overall markets. This is the last area of support before we get down towards these most recent lows. So if this breaks down, probably won't be very good for anything. So all right, guys, I just kind of want to show you what I'm looking at there. Just general choppiness everywhere. It's just everywhere. Mixed bags, mixed signals. Be very defensive with your trading. Be diligent with your stop losses. If you're thinking about getting into a trade, make sure it's a very high quality setup. You're comfortable with the entry point. You're comfortable with the stop loss. And if it's even questionable to you, I would just step aside, because markets like this, these choppy markets, there's guys I've seen have accounts chopped up in double digits just due to stop loss being hit after stop loss after stop loss after stop loss. So, all right, guys, there you go. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions or if you think my analysis is flawed in some way, shape, or form, or if you see something in the patterns here that I haven't pointed out. Also, YouTube likes that, so I'm kind of, I guess, begging a little bit for some YouTube love. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're just finding me, and thanks for joining me, guys. I'll see you next time.